Thank you all for being here, and thank you for joining us for our 8th annual Conflict Resolution Month. This is a time where we at the university are able to focus on some skills that maybe we're not really born with. That is, how do we resolve conflicts in ways that are professional and productive, that will, hopefully lead to peace. We know that conflict that is not resolved or isn't resolved well leads to real harm in workplaces and in organizations. It can result in people calling in sick when they're not, or slowdowns, or even sabotage. All of this affects the bottom line of the organization, its customers, its clients, and the workforce. My name is Gene Roberts, and I'm the Director of Student Legal and Mediation Services at Sam Houston State University. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today and to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here. I would like to encourage you to follow us on our social media, all of which is SHSU SLMS on all of the major social media. You'll be able to see future events for this month, and if you're a student, things that you can do to win some prizes. You can also go to our website, which is shsu.edu/SLMS. I don't know about y'all, but sometimes when I'm been in a class and the instructor says we're going to have a group assignment, I don't get a very good feeling. I'm not a big fan of group assignments. And sometimes people like those group assignments, I guess, and sometimes we don't. In the workplace, we also have our own group projects and groups of people that we have to work with. And sometimes there's conflict that occurs within those groups for a variety of reasons. Today, we are really pleased to have Karey Barnes with us. He's an expert in conflict resolution and management, and he's going to talk to us today about group dynamics and strategic planning and how we can resolve conflicts that show up in those environments. Karey is the Director of Student Rights and Responsibilities at South Texas College. He also serves as a Title IX investigator and provides ombuds services for his college. In his spare time, he also teaches criminal justice classes. He's a terrific trainer, and he trains students, faculty, and staff on conflict management resolution. And it's just a real pleasure to have Karey here. So Karey, thanks for being here today. And if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about yourself and South Texas College and what you do there so that we can get a good feel for you.
So I'm really excited to be here. Been trying to prep for this for the last couple of weeks since Gene extended the offer. About South Texas College, we're a 2-year institution in the city of McAllen, which is right down on the border between U.S. and Mexico, right off the Rio Grande. I was commenting earlier that if you're any further south than we are, you're either in the river or already in Mexico. That's literally how far down south we are. But it's a 2-year institution that was founded back in 1993. And Governor Ann Richards then created and signed legislation to create the school to offer educational services in the area to help students who were impoverished. So we've grown quite a bit over the years, starting out at about, I think, 3,500 students in our first class to now we're just over 31,000. We have associate's degrees. We have a couple of baccalaureate degrees. We have several certificates, and we have a large population that does continuing ed. So my background actually is that I'm a former probation officer. So when I came down to McAllen to work as the ombudsperson, I had to do a lot of research and catching up as far as conflict resolution. So for 15 years, I've been on this journey to get better at helping folks resolve conflict, but also to be a better combatant, I guess you could say, when I'm in conflict myself. So it's been a journey, and again, I'm just excited to be here, and hopefully I'll give you guys some nuggets to walk away with and possibly make conflict less frightening or less contentious when you have to deal with it.
Now, Karey, if we were in so-called normal times, you would be on campus, and that would be sort of a homecoming for you because you studied at Sam Houston State University and you actually played for our football team here. Tell us about some of those experiences, specifically, how it helps you, how they help you in your current position and what we're going to be dealing with today.
So that was about 25 years ago, 30 pounds ago, and a whole lot more hair ago. But nonetheless, I had some really great times up there in Huntsville and playing for the Bearcats. So it's like Gene said, whenever I get an opportunity to come back, it is always a homecoming. And I think we've done one or two others of these on occasion. And so I hope in the future I'll have other opportunities because I really love the city and I really love the campus. As far as my experiences and what I learned, as a football player on a football team, there is always a plan. And in many cases, the coaches would talk about situational awareness. What are you going to do if X happens or if Z happens? Our military is like that as well. They have plans and then they have contingency plans and then they have contingencies for their contingencies. And in this current state we're in with COVID, you've probably also had to talk about COVID protocols and what happens if X happens or if Y comes to pass. So you've had to develop some of those type of response plans as well. And I think from the standpoint of working with and dealing with conflict, we should also start to develop those contingency plans as well. Conflict, in my opinion, is inevitable. It's going to happen. And depending on how ready we are and what plans we have in place to deal with it, often dictates if it accelerates uncontrollably or if we're able to manage it in an effective way early on. And so this slide that Gene has up right here, I was kind of thinking about sort of the three pillars that come into play when we talk about office or group dynamics. And there's usually a problem. And with that problem, we have basically, in my opinion, three things to kind of focus on. Is it going to be discipline? Is it a training issue? Or is it a need to get people to the table to talk and try and work it out? And so the whole point of this slide is just to try to drive home the point. If there is a need for discipline, we should be ready to discipline the party or the parties. Training is not a substitute for discipline. Likewise, training is not, or conflict resolution is not a substitute for training, and discipline is not a substitute for conflict resolution. And so what I mean by that is that there are going to be inevitably some situations that would better be suited if the employee or the individual was disciplined in a formal manner. And there are going to be situations, hopefully if you catch them early on, that you can use conflict resolution or some sort of dialogue to actually get the people to a place where they can talk out whatever their issues are. And of course, training, if individuals haven't been trained and they're making poor decisions, then it's very important that you get them to a place where they're trained up and they can be effective in their workspace.
Karey, one of the things is that sometimes we talk about group dynamics, kind of over here as its separate thing, and we talk about strategic planning over here as its separate thing. And today, as part of the training that you're providing to us, we're talking about both of those concepts together. Why is it important to talk about these two concepts of group dynamics, strategic planning together?
So this is kind of my own vantage point or my own philosophy about this. I don't know if you folks actually look at your strategic plans on a regular basis. You'd probably say no. You're probably laughing at me like, is he kidding? But I think it's probably very important that we move beyond only looking at them when we have to update them or because we're going through our accreditation reaffirmation. So we got to kind of know what it is, because we may get asked that question by someone who is working on our reaffirmation. So I think it's very important to kind of know the mission, the value, the goals, the action plans, where the institution is headed, and more importantly, where your particular department is headed. I think part of what happens with group conflict is kind of opposing views or opposing values about where we're going or what we're supposed to be doing. I believe conflict can either can come between clients, employees, coworkers, and it's not something that we should be caught off by, because that's just the reality of life. I think that part of the strategic planning in this can be a vehicle to kind of shift the dialogue to a different place, to give them a different vantage point to view the conflict in. So I want to say that it's probably best used to reframe the actual conflict as a way to say, is this in consistency, or is it consistent with the goals and the values of the institution? Is this conflict working toward us completing or reaching that ultimate goal, that aspirational goal that our mission says should be at the heart of what we're doing at the institution? I don't know if I'm making sense when I'm saying it that way. It's kind of hard to judge because I can't see a lot of faces.
One of the many disadvantages of Zoom. So, thank you, first of all, everyone, for bearing with us on this. And yeah, it's tough from a speaker standpoint when you're looking into a camera and you're not, really able to see things. I do want to encourage folks that we should have a chat up. And so as Karey's talking, and if you've got questions or for him or something you want to, give to him in terms of, hey, here's a situation, feel free to do that. We are monitoring the chat. So in case any of y'all decide to Zoom bomb us, y'all will be expelled from the Zoom. We don't like that here at CM Houston State. Yeah, Karey, one of the things, in all seriousness, I think, what you're saying, and something that's important to me is, who are we and how does this behavior that we're experiencing align with our institutional or departmental values, goals, strategic plan, that type of thing. One of the things that you've done and that I've seen you do before and have read about you doing is this concept called open dialogue. And for those of you viewing us today, we've asked Karey, give us some tools that we can use, good balance of theory and tools. And so one of the tools that we're asking Karey to talk to us today is this concept of open dialogue. I know it's something that you use at South Texas College. Can you explain that to us? How does it work? Why is it important? And what does it do?
So what we've done here at South Texas College is we've tried to engage individual departments, student groups, whether it be faculty or staff, student government, sometimes those individual groups and sometimes a mix of the two, because we actually want them to get in and become accustomed to talking directly to each other face to face without there being a crisis or an issue. And so one of the tools we use is what's called a talking circle, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a second, but it's the talking circle is founded under the restorative justice principles, and it's a technique that's used in criminal justice. And we've found that it has been a really effective tool to bring students and, again, individual members from across the campus into a safe space and to talk about issues that aren't necessarily a problem or an issue right now, but just to have a dialogue where we share and we learn to respect opposing views and we just get accustomed to talking to each other in a collegial manner. One of the things we do down here at South Texas College is that we participate in the National Week of Conversation, and you can look for it with the hashtag Listen First. And basically, you're just trying to have decent, respectful conversations with individuals. We normally put out feelers to get our students and the employees at the college to help us select a topic, but you don't necessarily have to do that. You can select any topic to talk about. If you go to their website, they have a bunch of information about specific topics that you can have a discussion about, and they also give you a sort of a roadmap to implement it and how to handle it. But our preferred practice when we talk about these open dialogues is to use the talking circle, and it kind of puts everyone on a level playing field. We sit in the circle, which has no beginning or end. We talk about connectedness, and we just have people sit and listen. And the idea is that they listen respectfully. They sort of try to gain some perspective about the other person's views without engaging in back and forth or being abusive when you're having this conversation.
You know, when we talk about group conflicts, sometimes one of the things that here at Sam Houston, we've got a pretty active verbal Aikido group with Ken Hendrickson over at the graduate school leading that. And one of the things that Luke Archer talks about, who developed verbal Aikido, is kind of this word stretching thing. And so one of the exercises is when you talk about one word, what would be its opposite? And when I think about group conflict, to me, the opposite of group conflict is teamwork. And I think that's something that we all aspire to. Karey, with your experiences and with the training that you do, you've done a lot to help increase teamwork. What are some of the things that you've learned from those trainings that you can share with us today to improve teamwork and to improve communications in the groups that we find ourselves?
Really, I think it's important for folks to start to get comfortable talking to each other. We're in this digital age, which COVID has not exactly been a godsend. And so now we're even more separated than we were before. And then we have all the challenges of technology. And so to the best of our ability, I think we have to get back to a place where we are talking to each other just for the sake of talking. I know most of the time my phone doesn't ring unless there's a problem. No one calls to say, "Hey, Karey, how was your evening? What'd you eat for breakfast this morning?" You know, we don't have those conversations anymore. And I think we got to get back to that. But also, that being said, those conversations have to be done in a way where people don't feel judged, where they feel safe to be able to express themselves and to talk about their views or share their opinions. Gene and I, we've known each other, 10, 15 years or so, somewhere in there.
Something like that, yep.
We actually met at a conference for mediation up in Dallas, and we just had a dialogue about who we were and why we were at the conference that day. And those type of conversations don't happen all the time. So they have to be intentional, that we actually seek folks out and we're curious about them and their story. And again, I think I said this already, make sure that people feel safe, that they're not going to feel threatened or attacked for sharing the things that they share. It has to be okay for them to be different, to have different views, and for us to not take those things personal. That's one of the biggest things that we work on when we do our facilitated conversations, our talking circles, is to try to build some sort of safety in those circles so that folks, they want to participate in them and they feel safe participating in them. Another thing about circle, we do quite a bit of circle, and inevitably there's always at least one person that cries. And it's not intentional. It's just one of those things that happens as we share, and we're able to unpack some of maybe the baggage that we're carrying with us. They get really emotional, and sometimes it's just talking about things like your favorite football team. I know one of the circles we did was just talking about sports and the excitement about the football season starting, and someone started talking about the Dallas Cowboys. And before you know it, there was at least one person that became emotional, not because it was a scary topic or a scary conversation, but that person's connection to the Cowboys was watching football with his father and his grandfather every Sunday. And when we shared that circle and had that dialogue, that person actually had lost both of those people. And so they weren't really sure how they were going to manage the new football season. And then out of that, someone else had a story about a grandparent, and someone else had a story about a grandparent. And before you knew it, there were several people talking about grandparents and shared experiences and what they did on holidays, and lots of tears flying. But it was a very emotional, empowering circle where we were able to actually see people differently than they normally see them. That's huge for me because I'm not a guy that typically smiles. Being a former probation officer, I always had this scowl on my face because it was the nature of the work I did. And then all of a sudden I'm coming into higher ed, which is supposed to be a more friendly, more collegial environment. And here I am, this probation officer who is accustomed to locking people up. And so people are being friendly and they're smiling and they're asking me questions. And I'm kind of like, I don't really want to talk to you. And I remember someone saying every time they asked me a question, I'd kind of get this scowl on my face. And it would more or less be me thinking or formulating my answer, but they always took it to mean that I was upset at the question. And so I've had to sort of monitor my demeanor and how I interact with folks. And again, going back to COVID, it is wreaking havoc for me because all they see is my eyes. And again, I usually have this lowbrow sort of look when I'm talking to folks. And so I have to be very mindful of the nonverbals that I'm actually putting out. I don't know if I'm rambling, Gene. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. And you're bringing up a couple of points, and we've got a question from the audience. And before you get to that, I just want to kind of emphasize and validate how important it is for us to look at ourselves in the mirror. And I'm guilty of this too, because sometimes I'll have facial expressions where someone will interpret it rightfully so. Gene's upset with me or something. It's like, no, that's just how I'm thinking. That's my thinking face. But I've got to be aware of that so that when I'm communicating with someone else, I'm sharing with them, I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm thinking about it, and you're important enough to me where I'm thinking about it. And sometimes we just have to, do that, look at ourselves in the mirror when we're doing things. Another thing that strikes me about this pandemic, and I've told people about it, it's like, man, I wish we never had this pandemic. At the same time, things like being remote in some respects helps us to be more human because we're able to see people in their houses and their cats and their dogs and their kids, and all this stuff comes up that we would not have seen in the workplace. And I don't know about y'all, but for me, I appreciate all of that because it's like, oh, other people have, stuff going on outside the workplace too. And, from like a leadership or employer standpoint, a lot of folks want that, when you come in the door and check in, that stuff gets left behind, but we know it doesn't. It's with us during the workday. And so in a way, the remote technology allows us, to look into people's homes. And that's kind of a weird way to say it, I think. But it's like, there's other stuff going on in our lives besides what's going on now. We've got all sorts of, stimuli and stress and good things, bad things going on. So here's a question from the audience. And thank you for participation. We know who you are, and you'll get some extra credit for this. Can you share how you set the rules for the circle? Time, taking of notes, facilitating this process to make sure it's a safe place.
Sure. There are a couple basic rules that you may actually implement as the keeper of the circle. And it may be something as far as behavior. If you're sitting in the circle, you can't be in the room unless you're sitting in the circle. That's a rule. You have to agree to only speak when you have the talking piece, which is passed around the circle. And then there is the actual process of going through setting rules with the group so that you as a circle keeper are not really the one who lays down the rules, but you allow the group as a whole to determine what the parameters for the discussion are going to be. And so one of the circles that I participated in, an individual was adamant, sometimes people make really good comments and I'm accustomed saying, thank you for that comment, or I'm accustomed to saying I agree with what they're saying. And if you're telling me I can't talk, how do I do that? So one of the agreements in the circle was you can either gesture with your finger, yes, I agree, or you can snap, yes, I agree, or you can just look at them and nod your head, yes. And the great thing about the circle is that now there's no one particular person controlling what the rules are. The circle starts to police itself, and people will actually say to other folks in the circle, you're not following the rules. Could you please follow the rules? And so it becomes a shared responsibility as opposed to one person having to set those parameters and control it themselves.
Karey, you've talked to us about some group dynamics. Let's kind of shift a little bit to strategic planning, because after all, it's part of the title for today's topic. Strategic planning is a big deal for organizations. Sometimes we call it strategic planning. Sometimes we call it institutional effectiveness. Sometimes we call it plans for continuous improvement. It all has sort of that feel to it. They all have this, flavor of planning for the future. So what are some of your thoughts about having groups design strategic plans? And what have been some of your experiences in having individuals align behaviors with the strategic plan? And I think I get to move to another slide for you.
Yes. So that's the strategic plan from Sam Houston State. I don't know how many of you have actually seen it. When the last time it was that you saw it, or if you're kind of like, I don't even know what that thing is. That wouldn't surprise me. They're difficult to deal with. They're cumbersome, especially in larger institutions. They are probably created from sort of this top-down aspirational vantage point, which I always find frustrating because it'll come down from a group of people who may not actually know the realities of what I'm dealing with on the ground floor. And so then I'm required to piece my strategic plan together up to where they are. So there's kind of this gap that you could say in how these plans are developed. I in my time on the board of the Texas Mediators Association, I co-chaired the plan and or the development of the new plan that we were trying to implement. And I kind of have a philosophy about this. And my philosophy is, even though you have a strategic plan that has already been set by the president or your executive council or your board, I still believe that you should take that plan and you should do a deep dive as far as looking at it and trying to get your head around, is this plan the most effective plan for the school? Or is this mission still what our mission should be? Hopefully at the end of that, you come to the realization that, yes, the mission is exactly where we should be headed. And once you're comfortable with that, then you start to build your plan to make sure that you achieve what that mission is. And I think there are a lot of instances where we kind of develop our plans based off of what we want to see our department look like, but not necessarily what the actual mission or values are of the institution as a whole. So in my opinion, I think you have to take some time to digest that thing, pull it apart, get some understanding about why it is what it is, and how you then steer your department to achieve that. I think that it's a part of setting the tone for what your office is going to look like. I think it helps create a broader conversation. Now, when I say conversation, I'm talking about your team. I don't know how many folks actually develop their departmental plans alongside their actual team. For me, I don't touch my strategic plan without consulting with the other people in my office and us sitting down together and trying to figure out what direction we're going to go and how we're going to do it. And I know it's cumbersome. I know it's hard to get folks together. We're spread out over 5 campuses in 2 counties, so you can imagine that it's kind of difficult for me to get everybody in my team in, but I will say it is a worthwhile exercise to get everybody in to talk about what your part of that plan is going to be. Number one, it helps them focus in on what they're supposed to be doing and why they're supposed to be doing it. But it also helps you get more creative and have some broader ideas about how you can implement your plan by getting that feedback from those individuals in the beginning of it. I think it helps them also get buy-in to that plan by having them take part in its development. What we found is it actually has brought our team closer together by having that retreat and us going through that process as a team and sharing that dialogue, talking about what the institution's mission is, and then figuring out where we fit in that overall mission. One of the departments that we've worked with recently, where we were trying to build some unity and some camaraderie, and we brought them in and we showed them their mission. And to my surprise, and I would say never make assumptions, to my surprise, the team had never saw their departmental mission. They had never saw their departmental strategic plan. And so I'm standing there and I'm saying, then how the heck can they reach those goals if they don't even know what they are? No wonder you have people pulling in different directions, because they've never been in a situation where they know what direction they're supposed to pull in. So we spent a full day working on team building exercises, pulling their plan apart, talking about what they thought was effective, what was not effective, and then putting forth a plan to try to build a better plan for the next cycle. Now, did we actually accomplish that? We haven't got there yet. We are still in the process of working with that team, but we did build some unity and some continuity in what the overall vision for the office was supposed to be. They went through this process where they revamped our admissions center. And part of that was to create a more connected, friendly environment without people standing in the long lines. And a lot of the folks that worked on the admissions team didn't understand why. And the change in the office, including construction, had already taken place, but the department was in shambles because they didn't understand why the office setup was changed. And there were some hurt feelings because there were several people who actually lost office space. And we know how big office space is. And now all of a sudden, I don't have an office space, but I'm an important person. So what are you doing to me? So there had to be that opportunity for them to not only engage with their coworkers, but to also talk to their management team about why they were having this anxiety. And it gave the management team the opportunity not only to hear those concerns, but also to put out what their vision for what they wanted to do with the mission to meet the goals that had been set by the president and the institution. So it was really powerful conversations. There were tears as well during that conversation, but it allowed folks to actually see the plan, which they hadn't been a part of either developing or even having a real idea of why that plan was put in place.
Karey, you've mentioned a couple of things now, and as in my mind, I'm trying to put stuff together. And one of the things that I'm hearing from you, and tell me if I'm on the right path or wrong path, is just the importance of having kind of the right people at the table. A lot of times with things like mission statements, sometimes that's made from people at the top. Maybe it gets put on a website, and then in the old days, it would be put on a shelf somewhere. As we get to, our day-to-day business, we've done the mission statement, good, next. But one of the things that you talked about with both the restorative circles and the group dynamics with mission statement is the importance, I think, of that group buy-in.
Right.
And if they've got a kind of skin in the game, hey, I helped develop this. And so now we help to protect it and to implement it, and that type of thing. Right track, wrong track? What do you think?
No, I that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Having, again, going back to football or sports in general, we spend a couple weeks in camp together. We sleep in the same dorms. We travel together. We're on the road together. All those things that help bind us as a team. And we don't actually do that in our workplace. And I think it's important because if we can get people to have an idea of this is the direction we're supposed to be going in, this is our ultimate goal. And football, realistically or not, we always say from day one, the goal is to win a championship. And everybody is working toward that goal. And if you're not working toward that goal, then you're going to be the outlier, and things may be a little bit uncomfortable for you. This may not actually be the place where you're going to be. Now, don't get me wrong, it's easier said than done to remove a part of a team. In football, you trade the person away or you put them on waivers. We don't have that structure in the work environment. But I think if we move to a place where we're having these conversations about what our direction, our goals are supposed to be, and we focus the team in on that, then I think we have a better chance of pulling together some effective teams that have great chemistry. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they're going to serve our students and our clients better. So I think it's a really important part that we talk about it, and we get people accustomed to the idea of what our mission and our goals are supposed to be. I think hiring should be intentional. And I think part of that intentionality is, again, looking at your mission, your goals, what your vision for the office is. And I think you should select the best candidate that will fit in with what that mission, those goals are, that vision is. I like to say that the best person doesn't always get the best interview doesn't always get the job in my area, but it is the cog that's going to fit in with the rest of the team that is going to be able to help us achieve the mission, our vision, and our particular goals for that particular department. And so again, I think we should be very intentional about who we introduce into our departments, into our team, into our extended families. I think you should look at not only your mission and your goals for your department, but you should evaluate your job description. Is your job description in line with the mission and the goals of your department and the institution? A lot of times we put things in there that HR tells us we have to put, but when we talk about exactly who we want to bring in the team and what skill set or what values or mannerisms they should have, we kind of leave those things out. And so I think you should start thinking about that. One of the things that I've noticed in some hiring cases is that folks will put the ability to work independently, and then they have a manager that micromanages. Going to cause a little bit of conflict? A little, probably. If you have a person who does not work well being micromanaged and they applied for a position where it says they're going to have freedom to act, and then all of a sudden they have to check off or check in or sign out every time they're going to do something, it's going to make life difficult. There's going to be some conflict that arises out of that. So we have to be mindful about what we're putting in the job descriptions, because people are going to apply for those positions based on what we put in. And if that's not the reality when they come on board, it's going to be problematic.
Karey, we have a question from someone. They wanted to know how you're able to get everyone to buy in. So buy-in for us is starting early. Again, we were very deliberate about who we were going to bring in the team, the kind of person that we were looking to have as part of our team. But again, the buy-in part, as far as I'm concerned, my perspective is, again, allowing folks to question why we're doing things the way we're doing, and to allow them to have some input, and ultimately they feel heard and they will come along. I think when folks are not given that opportunity to kind of share their views or their thoughts about things, it becomes very difficult to bring them along, because they're going to be stuck at not being heard. So having some process, whether it is as a team, whether it is a one-on-one, but having some sort of process where you can put that person in a position where they can ask you questions, you can ask them questions, you can dialogue back and forth. And ultimately, you may not take all their ideas. You may take all of their ideas, some, none. But basically giving them that ability to actually talk about and discuss the things that they're most concerned about usually is enough to get folks to come along.
Karey, let's shift just a little bit to this concept of stress. And I think most of us would be in agreement that the events of the last 6 or 7 months have placed an enormous amount of stress on people, because we've had a shift on how we've done things since the medieval times for higher education institutions to something dramatically different, whether it's professors and teachers, administrators, staff. Sometimes stress can be really helpful because it helps us to focus, but sometimes it can be very disruptive too, and makes we make bad decisions. So in terms of leadership and leading groups, what do we need to be aware of in terms of stress, and what are some tools that you can help provide us on how to manage stress? And I think I'm supposed to go to the next slide for this one.
Yes. So this is an interesting slide. We've been collecting some data all the way back to 2011. And the yellow squares indicate that this was the highest factor for that particular group. The blue is the second highest, and then the purple is the third highest. And whenever we do mediation training, we'll have the individual departments do what's called a cost of conflict calculator. And it'll kind of spell out where our money's going when we're dealing with conflict. And so, yes, if you look at the slot that says reduce decision making, most of those squares are yellow. And so most often since 2011, whenever we've done these trainings, these groups have said that conflict reduces our decision-making ability, that we make bad decisions.
because we are basically in fight or flight or freeze mode. And they're not making the best decision for the institution or the department. They're probably making the decision that makes them feel good at the moment. So yeah, stress causes all sorts of turmoil in our departments. It can play out in the form of wasted time because folks just can't function. They may be taking extended breaks, whether it's to have a cigarette or it's to go get a Coke or just to kind of stroll about campus because the tension is so thick. This stuff also plays out in sort of revenge type tactics where individuals may sabotage the workplace. Data or information may disappear or not get done. They may withhold information or data from their colleagues because they want to make them look bad. Even as a probation officer, I was aware of one case where a deputy constable actually stole about $5,000 worth of equipment because he felt like he was entitled to a raise. And if I couldn't get the money that way, I was going to get it another way. And so there was turmoil in that department when the county audited it. So yes, stress is a huge factor. One of the things that we use, again, goes back to the team building and trying to create a certain type of team or camaraderie within the team, is to having a day where they just get together and we try to make it effective and worthwhile today, but we'll pull them together as a team and we'll do some team building exercises. We've done that a couple times with teams where we're not going to really talk about the workspace. We're going to have a dialogue and we're going to talk about things unrelated to work. And we're going to do some exercises that the intent is team building, but they're fun and you don't really know you're doing team building while you're doing it. One of those exercises is called Dr. Know-It-All, and it's an impromptu game where everybody sort of gets in a circle and someone will start off a sentence with one word where I will say today, and then the next person will repeat the word, and we got to get through a complete sentence, whether it's 5 people or 25 people. Well, we got to make a complete sentence using commas if it's 25 people, so it's a run-on. But you got to work together as a team to complete a sentence. And then depending on what we talked about, sometimes it's a really funny sentence. But you'll start to see a little bit of the folks who are maybe not as open to the team building because they'll try to end the sentence early. And then those are the people we kind of nudge and say, come on, get with it. Come on, get with the program. Let's do it again. But, having those opportunities to team build, I would even say starting a project in the office. Maybe there's some recycling that needs to be done. And so that's a team project that we're going to do in our department. We're going to take it upon ourselves to do some recycling in the building that we're in. Sam Houston has those very pretty trees that shed all those very pretty leaves in the fall. That may be a project that we try to work on where we're going to go rake the leaves. I would like to rake the leaves and then jump in the pile myself. I don't know if you guys can get away with that though, but that would seem like a pretty cool sort of team building thing that we could do. Go jump in the leaves. What else? Did I answer the question, Gene?
Just make sure your leaf pile is 6 feet apart from other leaf piles. You'll be all right. And wear a mask. Hey, we do have a question from someone in our audience, and yes, you did answer that question.
Before I move on, let me just say this real quick. So if you look at that column with the green box that's circled, and it says healthcare costs, if you notice, there was only one instance where healthcare costs made it into our top 4. It's usually not on the radar. And the reason for that is that we don't equate conflict or stress to health. And so you may see someone who is chronically taking sick leave. There may be something else going on. They may truly be sick, and it may be an indicator that there is some unknown conflict sort of circling around that makes this person not want to come to work. So just be mindful of that. And most of the time, we're getting sick and we don't equate work as being something that makes us sick. But I can tell you that there are lots of instances where, yeah, work does actually make us sick, whether it's the management, whether it's the coworker, whether it's the idea of what we have to do on a daily basis. Work can make you sick. So just that's just one of those things to kind of be aware of.
Well, and I was going to say, Karey, this chart that you prepared for us, I think is so powerful. Because on the one hand, we talk to students and others about soft skills, things that we use, how we treat each other, that type of thing. And a lot of times that's not quantifiable. We know the person has it, whatever it is. And one of the things that this chart does is it really helps to provide a quantification of not soft skills, but soft results maybe of conflict in the workforce and in group dynamics. And like you're saying, maybe someone is taking more sick time than they normally would, not because they're ill, but because of they don't want to work with someone else who's being difficult. Or, gosh, we've got to restructure parts of our organization, not because the restructuring is good, but to get people away from each other, or we need to promote someone or, demote them. And along those lines, we've got a question from our audience, Karey. In your opinion, how much time do you wait for someone to come along?
Wow. It depends on, for me, it depends on when it starts to hurt the dynamics of the team. If that person is detrimental to our mission, to what we're trying to achieve, I think the sooner they are removed from the equation, the better. Now, I'm not an HR person, so let me just put that out there. So there are going to be all sorts of rules and regulations when it comes to suspensions, firings, relocating, reorganizing, those sort of things. But my opinion is that the sooner that bad element is removed from the equation, the sooner you will have a more effective team, a more collegial team, a healthier team. But you gotta engage regardless. The sooner the better. Gene will probably nod his head to this because in mediation we often we're trying to get to a resolution or a settlement that is forward thinking, but in a lot of cases we have to take a step back, and even if it's just for a little bit, to try to revisit some of the stuff that may have happened, some of the water that's under the bridge, because people may not be ready to actually move on until those things can actually be addressed. I would say this, that the longer we're in conflict, the more baggage we collect and the bigger our suitcase is going to be, and the longer it's going to take us to get to a place where we've got it out of our system and we're able to move on. So a disgruntled employee who's been disgruntled for 15 years, there's a lot of unpacking to do. And it may not even be things that are related to you or the team that they're on now, but that person probably has never been able to talk about those things or to effectively move forward. And you're going to have to get to the bottom of that before that person is able to move on. That's just the reality of it. And it's going to be different for different folks. I'll use myself as an example. Again, I've been doing conflict resolution and mediation over 15 years now. And I've taken enough assessments and gone to enough trainings to where I know how to make war with people. So there's no doubt if I'm in the middle of conflict, it's because it's intentional. I'm acting badly. I know I'm behaving badly, and I'm doing it intentionally. some of the people that may be in conflict or experiencing this right now may not have a real understanding that they are a bad employee. They may not have a real understanding that they're in conflict. There are normative behaviors that folks bring with them from home. I'm working with a gentleman right now who is a coordinator in a department, and we had a discussion where we were talking about making war and making peace, and he talked about his dad. And I'm going to mention politics, but I don't want it to devolve into a political conversation. What I will say is that this gentleman's dad is a strong Trump supporter, and he is an avid Democrat. And the dad's way of communicating with the family has always been, I'm the dad, I'm the man of the house, and I have the last word. And so for the son, he would go into the home to see the parents, and dad would jump down and start with politics. And he thought he was being effective because he would use what we call a power play. He would walk away. I'm not going to engage in the conflict. I'm going to walk away. And he thought that by doing so, he wasn't participating in the conflict. But the reality of it is that it would make dad even more angry for him to walk away than to actually have the argument. So dad, who wants the argument, would get very upset because the son would walk away. And when I asked him, so what is your intention by walking away? And he kind of smirked and he said, because I know it tees him off if I don't engage in the conflict with him. And so my response to him was, so you're intentionally making conflict in a passive aggressive way. And after he thought about it for a second, he was like, oh my God, you're right. But the flip side of it is, do I get into this argument with him? Because I feel like my head is going to blow up if I have this conversation. And I said, there's a way to do it. I said, I want you to think about getting into an argument with your dad, driving home and not speaking to your dad in the next week. And I want you to think about your dad's health. And he said, my dad has a very bad heart. And I said, so you get into this argument with him, both of you guys explode, you don't talk to each other for a week. And the next thing you know, you're getting a call, you need to go to the hospital because he's had a heart attack. And I said, you do not want your last conversation with your dad to be an argument. And I'm not saying give in or shift your beliefs or your politics. What I'm saying is that when dad wants to engage in that conflict, what you tell him is, I love you, dad. And you leave it at that. And every time he wants to engage in that combativeness, your response to him is, I love you, dad. And I said, try that and see if that works for you. Now, don't get me wrong, that may not work for everyone. But in his particular case, he actually brought his dad to tears because it had been forever since he had had a loving conversation with his dad. He was always in a situation where their conversations would end with arguments. So he hadn't told his dad he loved him in years. And all of a sudden his response to dad is, I love you, dad. And it stopped dad in his tracks because I don't want to talk about the political race and who's going to win this thing. I'd rather have a decent conversation with my son, who I also love. And there's a little perspective there. You know, is it really that important or necessary that we talk about the politics, or do we just care about each other and be cordial with other and be able to be in the room with each other without fighting? So right now that's work. I'm waiting for him to come back to me in a couple of weeks. Hopefully the wheels haven't fallen off because I know we're getting close to election day. So I'm kind of nervous about that. But I'm hoping even after election day, regardless of the outcome, they will still be able to have those conversations and say they love each other at the end of it. I feel like I'm rambling again, so I'm going to be quiet.
You know, how different would our world be if we just told each other, hey, I love you, instead of I'm canceling you.
Right.
Karey, it is 1:00 according to the official university clock. And so if y'all want to stay for a couple of more minutes, we can finish up. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Karey, I know that you had some sort of concluding thoughts, some final thoughts for us today. So I'm going to pull up that slide for you. And maybe if you don't mind, if we could maybe spend about 5 more minutes and then we'll finish up.
Yeah, no problem. So I was thinking about this as far as strategic planning goes, and the hiring process. I think review your strategic plan and your job descriptions before you hire, just to make sure you're kind of on the right track. Am I picking a qualified candidate who has the skill set that I need, but who is also going to fit in with the team and the vision that I'm trying to build for the department? Gear your interview questions toward that. And I use this example with the shopping cart, because you have picture A, which is the list of things, the 5 or 10 items that you're supposed to get. But whenever you actually go shopping, we get off track, which is picture B, where we end up with all these things that we really don't need, but they looked pretty on the shelf, or there was a coupon that came with them, so we scooped them up. I would say focus on being intentional about your hiring, and only picking what's on your list. So if you want an energetic person who can work independently, that's what you get. Don't get all the other bells and whistles because that person put them on their resume. It's probably not going to fit into your team or what your overall vision for that team is going to be. And Gene, you can go to the next one. And for the piece of it about conflict resolution, I'm sure most of us probably remember this nursery rhyme. No one yell out their age because I don't want anyone to date themselves. But the Jack and Jill is sort of a good example of sort of a workplace issue, I would say, because you want to frame the conflict as a business problem that you want to solve. So in a situation where Jack and Jill are supposed to be working together to get water, what is their communication like? Are they actually in a place where they're not communicating effectively, which is what caused Jack to fall down? So you want to frame that situation as a business problem that can be resolved. Not necessarily that Jack and Jill are arguing with each other, but what's the business problem that needs to be solved? Well, that's getting water, and how do they do it effectively and safely? You want to go on to the next one? And so this is an example of that. Again, framing it as a business problem. There's poor communication between Jack and Jill, and it's led to an increase in worksite accidents. So the business problem that may need to be solved is how can Jack and Jill communicate more effectively to ensure the safe collection of water, or what tools or resources do Jack and Jill need to collect the water safely? But you get away from maybe these personal arguments, and you focus on what they need to do to be effective as a team. And does that actually fit in with what your mission and your vision for your department is supposed to be? I hope that makes sense. And then, yeah, you can go ahead and go to the next one. These are a couple of weird type questions that we always throw in during our interview process. Again, depending on the rules with HR, you may have to actually check with them to see if this is appropriate for Sam Houston State, but we've been able to get away with it on a couple occasions. So we always throw one of these in, and I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes they can be tear jerkers. So if you decide to include one of these, be aware, because you don't know what that person is going to bring into the interview. But I'll tell you this much, you will get a sense of who that person is with one of these questions far greater than you would with the other 10 or 15 about why they want to be a Bearcat. Because it is one of those critical thinking questions where they're going to have to dig deep. There's no right or wrong answer, but it does tell you kind of where they're coming from and what their thought process may look like. So we always try to throw some of those in just because we want to try to get to the heart of who people are, how they think, how they may respond to certain situations. And it helps us get to know them personally. And we all know interviews are short and they're not really set up to get a lot of personal information, but questions like this will kind of help you do that. And again, it goes back to the heart of tying your hiring practice with your strategic plan. What type of individual is going to help us achieve that mission and those goals?
Well, Karey, I want to, on behalf of everyone here and everyone who's going to see this recording, I want to say thank you. Thank you for giving of your time. Thank you for being, emblematic, I guess, would be the right word. Maybe it's not, of our university's motto that you're part of about service and service to others. We've gotten some very nice comments in our private chat that people have sent to us about you and this conversation and the tools that you've provided to us. So thank you. We appreciate you. We're glad you're a Bearcat. And that's going to conclude our discussion today. I do want to encourage you to, please go on our social media and look for other events that are coming up. And another thing that you'll see on our website, and something that Karey talked about in terms of restorative justice and circles, we're actually encouraging people to watch a YouTube documentary. It's free, and it's called How to Love Your Enemy, a Restorative Justice Story. And it's about a city in Colorado where law enforcement and offenders and victims get together and talk about what's happened and the impact on the community. And it's very powerful. And I encourage y'all to watch that if you get a chance. How to Love Your Enemy, a Restorative Justice Story. So Karey, again, thank you. Everyone who's on here, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Give us a holler. Let us know how we can help you.